The US government shutdown is over. It comes, or almost over, will be in a few hours' time. It comes after Senate struck a deal to lift the debt ceiling, and that was in the past hour or so. Now, the deal means the government will now be funded until January the 15th, and then another round of talks will need to take place in 3 months' time. For reaction to the news, I'm joined by Robert Patman, Professor of International Relations at Otago University. Robert, thank you for coming in to see us.
Morning, Rawdon.
We're also going to be chatting about this term, the Chinese call to de-Americanize the world,
right,
which is closely related to this, is it not? Because this is an example of how much power the Americans hold globally in the fact that if they default, we sit here and we start sort of almost shuddering with fear.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, we live in a very interdependent world, and the Chinese in particular hold a big share of the American debt, and that's why some of the commentary in China has been quite nervous and quite critical of the United States. They believe the United States has been quite irresponsible in the way it's conducted itself, at least its lawmakers. One Chinese commentator said the American lawmakers do not seem to be sufficiently aware that what they're doing affects the rest of the world.
So that means that they've now said we're all fine until January the 15th. So will the same commentators in China be sitting back today saying, fine, we're all good?
I'm not sure they will. I mean, let's be quite clear on this commentary that's emerged from China. I mean, some American commentators, conservative ones, are saying, oh, the Chinese are trying to take advantage of American weakness. And so this sort of reinforces their worst fears about China. But on the other hand, you can see this as a country, China, a rising power, which is extremely nervous about its interdependence with the United States. And I think that really does, there is that sense that if anything goes wrong, if the default occurred, China would be a big victim of any economic problems that develop. And that's one of the biggest problems for China, is the nervousness about the loss of economic growth. There's an unofficial contract between the Chinese government and its citizens. That is, the Chinese government delivers economic growth and the citizens accept one-party rule. If a default occurred, that whole scenario could be put under strain. And the Chinese leadership are worried about political stability within China. And economic growth is the key to that.
So on the one hand, they're calling for this De-Americanization, which I assume is an economic de-Americanization, because the world economy is so heavily latched onto America. But on the other hand, they're saying, hold on, we are so dependent on America, which would be what, their biggest export market, their second biggest export market?
Well, I don't think they're not advertising their interdependence with the United States, but 36% of China's exports go to the United States. And of course, China's not alone. I mean, the US is a huge market for us in New Zealand. But I think what the Chinese have been calling for since 2009, and this commentary recently reinforced it, is that they would like to see a new international reserve currency, which is not the dollar. And so they have been quietly beginning to reduce their level of purchase of US Treasury bonds, which is currently about 1.28 trillion. So they're
trillion.
Trillion.
You dropped that in very, very calmly. 1.28 trillion. So, but this isn't a Chinese currency they want to introduce. This is a European-based currency. Is that right?
Well, they haven't been. They've got arrangements at the moment with the European Bank to carry out certain transactions not in a non-dollar currency. But the thing is, I think this is the Chinese believe, as a rising power, they should have more say in the international arrangements. They're particularly looking for more leadership in things like the IMF and the World Bank. At the moment, they feel they're still being treated as a developing country. They are a developing country, technically, of course, but they are certainly, their economic momentum means that they want to have more say.
It seems to me the Americans, is it unfair to say the Americans possibly don't realise quite how much dependency the rest of the globe has on them economically, and China to an extent as well? I mean, will they take these comments on board? Will they heed them? Or will they see this as the challenge?
To be fair, I think many American decision makers have been very fearful about the present situation. It's been a relatively small minority, the Tea Party, within the Republican grouping, that have been pushing this agenda. They've been using the budget vulnerability of the government, the need to pass a budget, and then the ceiling, the need to raise the debt ceiling. They've been using this as opportunities to press their agenda, like rolling back issues like Obamacare, whereas the majority of the Republicans say, well, that's over, we lost the election, the Supreme Court ruled on this issue in 2012, let's move on. But of course, this is an intra-Republican struggle. The moderate majority in the Republicans do not want to be seen as facing down their more recalcitrant colleagues in the Tea Party section.
OK, Robert Patman from Otago University, thanks for popping in.
Thank you, Rawdon.